An ever-evolving digital landscape. For your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emmanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today, we're going to dig into some concepts around design and user experience and visual identities and how AI is or is not impacting that. My guest today is Warren Wilansky, and he's spent over 25 years driving impactful projects that reflect the values of his clients and benefit their communities. Warren Wilansky is a leader known for fostering innovation, ethical design, and meaningful work, particularly in the arts, culture, nonprofit, and higher education sectors. He brings a unique focus on empathy, collaboration, and accountability to everything he does. Warren, welcome to the show.
Hi, Emmanuel. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking some time to have a conversation today. So thank you for doing that. Let's see. Now, in your past, you were part of summer camping. Is that a true statement?
That is absolutely true. In fact, it's been a while that I wrote about it, but maybe about a decade ago, I actually wrote up a post about how summer camp is the management style that I learned from first. And it's funny, when I was at summer camp, so I started when I was 9 years old, stayed there until I was staff at about 17 and worked there till I was 22, 23.
Love it.
I remember the first time I was there, I was about 19, 20 years old, and I was promoted to be like the assistant head of half of the camp. And I remember the person I was working for, who was one of my high school teachers when I was growing up, he looked at me and he said, it's very rare for somebody your age to get the opportunity to manage and take care of some of over 500 people. And I didn't realize it at the time. And I guess it stuck with me, and it made me realize there is a management style at summer camp, and I've used it since then. And it's a very hands-on, empathetic, and people-focused management style.
I love it. And so that's something you and I share. I was a YMCA camp counselor after having done some other camping experience. And I, too, understand that management style and have used it throughout my career. And we would always just call it the check-in, right? Like you're always managing by wandering around, because that's just the nature of summer camp. You maybe have a walkie-talkie, maybe not, but you've got to go and check in with everybody constantly to know what the heck is going on, what's the temperature of everybody.
But that's such an interesting point, because actually, up until the pandemic, that was one of the ways I managed in the office. We have an open concept office, and everybody was always in the room together. I was very resistant to remote work because my management style was to overhear a conversation or a tension elevating in one part of the office. And I knew I could walk over and try to diffuse it. I had to learn new skills myself. And now that we're a mainly remote first company, we still have an office. We still have people that are together, but I can't assume and lean in on that skill anymore. And it's kind of upsetting.
It's a challenge to get that kind of information out of Slack, isn't it?
Although you can. That's one thing that I have noticed. I guess that's something that I've learned about Slack, which is I don't go in and communicate all the time in Slack, but you can get general sentiment from Slack. You can know if somebody's having a bad day. You can know if somebody's not engaged. You can tell if somebody's struggling with a problem, so that I'm not going to go in and try to intervene on all of them, but I'm able to see the sentiment. It's not the same as the person, but the tool does help in some way.
I love it. Yeah. Well, it just speaks to your high level of emotional intelligence. And I think that really comes through a lot of the work that I've seen that you guys do at Plank also is really evocative, emotional, digital, which is not an easy thing to do, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, like it's not to say it's easy to build a website, but it's one thing to build a website. It's another thing to build a website that has an emotional impact on somebody. Or, you use design in such a way so that somebody connects with it. And it's just about sometimes the little subtleties. It's one thing you can build something that's really beautiful, but if the navigation is not effective, it's so subtle that you might just not like when you get lost in a website, I actually blame that on the website builder more than the actual user of the site.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Right. You haven't done A, the research, and B, you haven't tracked where people are getting stuck. Right. And there's
Totally.
a lot of tools now that we can use as marketers to find those journeys that's actually happening versus what we thought was going to happen.
Yeah, and sometimes the journeys aren't always, like I know that as somebody who's built sites, we fall into using data, and I think data is important, and doing things like A/B testing is important. But sometimes there's the soft skills of content. In other words, the soft skills of naming something. You might not realize, but the name of a section, or like sometimes we've run into organizations who they do what I would call inside baseball, where they're naming things based on what they think they
Yep.
should be named,
Right.
but that doesn't resonate with the person actually using the website. So I think that kind of expertise is important too.
Yeah. Now, I mean, Plank, you set yourselves up as web designers or web developers, is what I interpret. But I guess, what's kind of the process that you're using to exactly to neutralize some of that inside baseball with your clients?
Well, the first thing is that when we spend a lot of our time on upfront research discovery and project management and getting to know the team and the way they work, so that I'll put it this way: we never are going to be the expert in what some organization is all about. They're the experts in themselves.
Sure. Yep.
But we bring the outside perspective of what the best practices should be. So we call them out on some things that they might not have seen themselves. So I think that's one of the benefits of also working with an external team, is that they can sometimes see things that are not even evident to you. And you know what? Same thing for us. There are times that clients will call us on things that we think are just evident to everybody. So many acronyms that we use. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. Like the kind of language we assume people know. So it's our job also to kind of like stop ourselves and be like, okay, now we're just over jargoning things.
Well, I think that's an interesting progression, at least for me in marketing, is that it has gotten very complicated. And there are a lot more moving parts now than 25 years ago when you and I were just young bucks, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of it, at least from the marketing side, right? Is that it's a very complex entity that now we're working to simplify for clients.
Totally. And I think clients are also now getting to the point of trying to oversimplify things for themselves. In other words, we as marketing or builders have made things more and more complex. And now what's happening is a lot of people are getting called out on, well, I'll just use AI to do that. I'll just use AI to do that. Sure. And there's some good arguments in there, because that's when, let's say, marketers have gotten a bit lazy and they're just falling back on process. So some of that is kind of breaking the process on us. But at the same time, there's a lot of expertise that, AI is in its infancy right now. It's exciting and a spectacular tool, but it's still in its infancy. And if it's used poorly, it ends up just creating such generic marketing results that, that it doesn't always benefit an organization. It seems like it's an easy answer, but it's not the right one.
No, I would say it's actually off-putting, right? It's not on brand anymore. And it is repulsive. A lot of what comes out, especially, let's just say cold email right now, is insane. Mm-hmm. You've taken a tool that can very easily customize things to cold or warm prospects, and instead they're just the spray and pray, which we've seen. It's probably the third big iteration of spray and pray.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that the tools have gotten good enough that they know how to create emails that are going to get through the filters, but it doesn't mean the emails are any better. And I mean, I'm not sure for you, I'd like to hear your perspective, but the kind of work we do, because we're not doing cookie cutter projects, we want to do highly custom projects. Somebody's not going to choose us from a random cold email. The only times that I've ever gotten a project from a cold email was when the email might have been cold, but the message I sent was hot. In other words, I actually was interested in what the organization was all about. I was personally excited, and I was able to tell them about my passion for why I think we were going to do great work. And those are the only times I've gotten calls back on a cold email. And I do those once every few years when I actually encounter something that's really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, and then in that case, it becomes your creative act, and whether it gets accepted or not, it doesn't matter because you had to do it to feel like you're completing a cycle of creativity.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's not a numbers game. It's a game of really caring. It's a game about giving. It's a game about, wanting to share with people our expertise to help them. That's like giving is the kind of marketing that I think works best for the kind of stuff that we do.
Yeah, no, and I love the way you've niched into uh, kind of the nonprofit world and education, and it's because I think a lot of times those organizations that are doing some of the best, most important work in our cultures uh, either haven't identified the budget needs or are not spending it correctly to get good marketing, and so it's good to see somebody like you and your organization who are helping do that good work.
Yeah, I mean, and we're passionate about it because we want to work on things that we care about. And if we encounter, and we've gotten lucky that we found organizations that we're passionate about. But my passion is not somebody else's. So your passion might be, music, or somebody else's passion might be food, or the environment. Whatever somebody's passion is, if you discover something that you're passionate about, drive all the way in for it. Like become the expert at that, and basically serve those industries that you want to serve.
Yeah, and then you really aren't working. That old maxim. Um, I'm curious to hear a little bit about like where and how much AI of the AI tools you kind of brought into the workflow for your group, and then what you're seeing in terms of your clients and how they're adopting things like chat and some of these other tools that are retail ready.
Yeah, so there's a few layers to that. So I'll start with the layers that I know best. One is I know technology. In other words, our development team. Our development team is mainly using Copilot, and they've seen their productivity go up 25%. So, they're not over relying on it in that they're not using it to kind of try to, cut corners, but they're using it to basically do and get rid of the repeatable tasks that they constantly have to do. And I think that's a great responsible use of AI.
I agree.
I've heard of other organizations that are trying to replace developers, and I worry about that because it doesn't take into account, the quality of the code, the security of the code, and that's a concern I have, and I would never want to kind of risk for our clients. So
Sure.
that's the layer that I'm pretty comfortable with. The other one we're trying to work on now is from a kind of business operations side, and what can we do to simplify certain things, or what can I do when I have a chunk of data to kind of find ways to manipulate it or learn from it in a way that that takes away the manual cut and paste of, let's say, working in
Yeah.
Excel, for example.
Right.
That's the
Yeah,
kind of stuff
absolutely.
that's the kind of stuff that's great. For our clients, I think they're doing a lot of those things, but we have one client that we worked with that we actually built automated tools into their content management system. So,
Love it.
so we're working with the Canadian Encyclopedia. They're publishers of encyclopedic articles on a regular basis. And what they found is one of the things that they realized is that they've been publishing content for almost 30 years. They have some articles in the encyclopedia that could be 10 years old and it's not relevant anymore. Or something has come up in the news. So what we've done is we built a system so that if the news flags something that's an article in there, it flags them to go in and take a look at the news, gather up the news information. But since editorially, they cannot be just taking things directly from AI, they're using AI to learn that something needs to be updated, and then they're going into update it with the information they need.
I love it. So yeah, it's kind of again, it's an automated system to flag a human to go and do something.
Yeah, like the example they had at the time is they realized that Avril Lavigne is back in the news, and they're like, "Oh my God, we haven't updated her bio in 10 years." And then so they don't look credible as a source then. So they want to be a credible source on their information.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think it's interesting where people are trying to eliminate roles, and I think, like you described, that has so many red flags and so many improbabilities of success that it is kind of a Cervantes level error, right? We're out dueling with the windmills. I think the cleaner way is what you're describing, where you're taking these super repetitive tasks, or what I could call clicking around. Who wants to click around anymore, right? And there's no reason to. We have great tools. Make.com is something that you can train to do just about anything at this point, at the very simplest level. And then you've got N8N and all these other agent platforms, if you're technical, that can help to solve a lot of these problems. And Google just released a whole bunch of stuff yesterday too that I've been weeding through. But so I think it's interesting that us as marketers and designers have kind of embraced this very quickly and are on the cutting edge, and then bringing it into the business side, which is kind of the newest transition, right? The efficiency idea from the marketing department.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, for me, here's an interesting one. So I've been using, Google's notebook, LLM. And so, for example, the deep research. So one of the things I've done with it is, we get an opportunity where somebody sends us a request for proposal. So I've dropped a request for proposal in there and asked it to just create a podcast for me. And I can sit and listen to a podcast for 5 minutes and get a summary of it. Like, that's a fun little tool. Like, those things are fun.
Yeah. And so I did a similar thing where I had a strategic plan that was a massive document. I took that in there and then built the podcast around the strategic plan, so people had another way to consume that piece. And it was that podcasting activity out of Notebook is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about even small little things of, like, let's say, for example, I haven't done this yet, but I probably will. So let's say we have a meeting with a possible client, or let's say we have a meeting about a project and we're kicking a project off and we're doing discovery phase and we have a 2-hour meeting with the client. And what if we were to take the transcript from, let's say, from like a Google Meets meeting or that, and then turn it into a podcast and give it back to them almost as a report, rather than sending them a document that's 5 pages long, give them a podcast to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's perfect right now, because I think the time limit's 6 minutes. So that's about what most people's attention span are anymore.
Totally.
Well, let's dig just a little bit. I know we're coming up on our time, but I want to understand a little bit about what you're seeing visually that's happening on the web now that the AI is in our visual space, and what are you noticing as a professional?
So what I'm noticing, and I'm sure you know the term AI slop. I'm noticing a lot of AI slop in imagery as well. In other words, there's some stuff like some of the newest image tools, like Midjourney is fantastic, does some great stuff. Even the newest version of ChatGPT's image tool is getting better. But I find myself seeing a lot of really lazily created images that people are using on a regular basis. And I would just love to see more creativity. If people are going to be doing work with AI, have a little bit more creative vision with it and use it again as an assistant. In other words, if, let's say, hypothetically, I'm an illustrator and I have a style and you want to kind of automate some of the illustrations or do clip art, at least feed it your own style, so that you're like, okay, here's my style, here's what I'm all about, here's the stuff that I do. Now let's collaborate together on developing objects or images or things like that. I think it will be really great for things like icons, logos, small illustrations. I think you can develop stuff that is really unique with that. But it's when people try to create complex scenes from a visual perspective, I still believe that, like, there is a world for automation through AI, but there's also a world for really, really, really unique creative vision and designs. In other words, like, I can see the work my designers are doing, and then I've seen some of the website concepts that, let's say, other AI tools will create, and it's still just too generic. And I think for a client wanting to stand out and be unique, the same way a WordPress theme is not the right answer, an AI generated image is not the right answer for somebody who wants to do highly custom work.
Yeah, where you want to actually build a brand and create a feeling and stand out. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do feel some overwhelm, like just in the volume of content that's out now. And I wonder how that's going to impact the marketplace. What do you think?
I think it already is in ways we don't realize it. I was reading somewhere that Amazon had to limit independent book publishers to 3 books a day. So that means we've gotten to the point where people are just churning out books to toss them onto Amazon to just hope and spray that they're going to make some money with just creating random, unsourced books. And that for me is an example of a real problem. I think we're going to reach a saturation point where there's going to have to be a pullback from that because it's just not useful.
Yeah, and I think that brings up this concept of content curators and our roles as leaders in our little tribes or little domains, right? Where we can say, here are the speakers and the verified sources and the people that you want to follow that I follow, and the rest of the things you can just ignore because it's just it's garbage. It's a waste of your time and money.
Yeah, but sadly, somebody who is not technically savvy like you are or I am, they might not even know the difference, and they just will be like, sure. Oh, this is a book on, the recent politician X, and it's their autobiography. Okay, and they'll download it. They don't check the source, and they don't even think of that idea of checking a source, being sure of those things. It takes a bit of effort, and hopefully the AI tools will actually force that effort on everybody by citing sources, letting people know that you're not just reading a paragraph of text. That's a paragraph of text based on these 5 sources.
That's interesting. Yeah, I did. I had this situation where a friend of mine bought a book about fly fishing the Deschutes River in Oregon. And he's like, I was reading this novel and it was terrible. And I kept hoping it was going to get better. And then finally I just flipped to the back and it said this was created with AI. And he's like, I threw it away. It was a total, bait and switch. So it'll be interesting to see how we as a culture figure out a filtering system for that.
Yeah, and we will. The thing is, technology always leads before morality, and technology leads before rules. So the rules will catch up, but it's going to take a bit of time for them to catch up.
Yeah. Well, Warren, like I said, you and I could have this conversation all afternoon. I really appreciate your time. I love the work that you're doing, and if people want to get in touch with you to talk about website projects, how do they do that?
Easy one. plank.co. Plank.co is the place to find us.
All right. Well, there'll be links to all your important information on the show notes as well. And again, I appreciate your time and thanks for joining me today.
Great. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. Thank you. Well, some good reminders there. To not just keep humans in the loop, but remember what we're good at and what the outcomes are we're working to produce with our marketing, which is multidimensional, evocative, and emotionally gripping pieces, not just getting it out there. So take time to contract with people or to spend the time yourself developing pieces that are on brand and on point and reach the target market that you're after. Hope you found value in the show today. I also hope that you take the time to track down an AI tool that will save you time from your work, that will help to automate repetitive tasks, and that you reallocate that time to spend with your friends, your family, and get outside and enjoy some fresh air.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emmanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.